The immune system is sort of like the armed forces, and you want to have a really good military in your country, right? But you don't want them out of control, because then you got problems too. And so we want to have a really strong immune system, but we don't want it to go haywire. And so we have to be careful when we're strengthening the immune system to also keep it under control. Because if the immune system goes haywire, you can get things like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis. And if you get that immune system really ramped up, then you get inflammation. And inflammation underlies all chronic disease. And so while we want a really strong immune system, we also want a well-controlled immune system. And that's an important concept to keep in mind as we talk about some of these things tonight. There are 5 sections there. The first is the do's and don'ts of diet, and then exercise and rest, because that certainly affects our immune system. Then attitude and immune function. Remember, attitude is not something that happens to you, it is something you choose. And we'll come back to that. Then number 4, don't forget hygiene, really important. And 5, what to do if all else fails, okay? Because I'm here to tell you, you can do everything right and still get in trouble, okay? You might still have that grandchild visit you that's, you know, just a fomite of disease, but you can't say no, and so there. All right. The first thing there is diet, the do's and don'ts of diet. There's someone giving flu shots out front. Did you see that? But just because you get a flu shot doesn't mean it'll work, right? If you do not have an intact immune system, that flu shot will do you 0 good. And what we know now is your diet and how you're feeling at the time of the flu shot has a lot to do with your immune system's ability to generate the antibodies that then protect you from the flu. See, they don't give you antibodies against the flu out there. They give you a substance, an inactivated flu virus, essentially, that your body has to make antibodies against. And if it doesn't make antibodies against that protein, when the flu comes along, you'll still get it. And your diet depends to a large degree on how your immune system is going to respond to that. So what we know is this. They took a group of people, and they divided them according to their vegetable and fruit intake. And those that had 2 servings or less of fruits and vegetables a day, they compared with those that had 5 or more servings of vegetables and fruit a day. And they found that in response to an immunization, those that had 5 or more fruits and servings of fruits and vegetables a day had an 80% higher antibody production to the immunization. Question? A half cup. Okay? So those that had 5 or more half cups, or 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables a day, had an 80% higher response. Well, how about 6 servings, or 7, or 8, or 9, or 10? That's probably more where we should be. Yes, they even have a higher response. In one study I read, people that had several servings of kale in the week before their immunization had triple the response just from kale. So it's not a magic thing, because spinach will help, and the salad you had tonight would help, and if we had had some good blueberries, they would have helped. Colorful fruits and vegetables stimulate the immune system. What are the best? Probably berries and deep green leafy vegetables. They look like the best ones to stimulate the immune system and get it really ramped up to antibody response without making that immune system hyper-irritable and overreactive. Because particularly in the green leafy vegetables, there are compounds that keep the immune system from overreacting, but get it ready to fight invaders. So we want that nice balance in the immune system that colorful fruits and vegetables provide us. Interestingly, carrots don't do as well as the deep green leafy vegetables, and so I'm not against carrots, but if you want to really make that flu shot work, have some kale or collards or broccoli, one of the brassica families, cabbage. Purple cabbage works better than green cabbage, actually, at stimulating the immune system. So those are all very helpful things that you can do, not only to fight off infections, but if you're going to get an immunization, make sure you have a good diet before you get that immunization. All right, next on the list there is beta-glucan. Has anyone heard of beta-glucan before? Oh, well, we can skip that topic. No. How about nutritional yeast? Oh yeah, you've heard of that. Beta-glucan is found in nutritional yeast, and they've done about 10,000 studies on beta-glucan in nutritional yeast and its effect on the immune system. So it's been very well studied, and what we know is beta-glucan stimulates the immune system, particularly if the individual is stressed. And they've looked at marathon runners. You may or may not know that if you run a marathon, for the week after that marathon, you're at really high risk for coming down with an infection. Because that much running, remember what happened in the first marathon? The winner died, right? Yeah, that's way back in Greece. I'm not against marathon running because then I'd be against my son, who's an ultra marathoner. That means 50 miles or more. But it's not the best for your immune system for the week afterwards. But they found that if people will take a half to 1 teaspoon of nutritional yeast a day, it completely blocks the negative effect experienced by ultra-marathoners or marathoners after their race. And they found that in one study looked at a group of women who described themselves as very stressed, and they divided this group of 100 women into two. Half they put on placebo and half they put on nutritional yeast. Those that they put on nutritional yeast had no increased risk of cold or flu, versus those that were on placebo had a considerably increased risk. So particularly in stressful situations, either physically or mentally, beta-glucan is really helpful at preventing your immune system from taking a nosedive. And nutritional yeast is very easy to take. There are other benefits to it. One of the ways we like to use it is with cashews to make a cheese sauce. And those of you who have come to this class for a while, my wife has demonstrated that cashew cheese sauce. And you can certainly get a half teaspoon. Another way you can use it is you can use it when you make popcorn. You can put it on for a seasoning. It gives a nice cheesy flavor to it. How many of you have had Little Lad's popcorn? Okay, quite a few. They use nutritional yeast in that, and it gives it the nice flavor, along with some other seasonings, and I think dill, weed, and a few others. But Nutritional yeast is a wonderful way to increase your immune system function. Just a half teaspoon a day for 4 days, there was a marked increase in salivary IgA. IgA is found in saliva, it's found in tears, it's found in the urinary tract. It is the first line of defense against infection. And after only 4 days, the IgA level went up by 80%. So I'd encourage you, especially in times of stress, to consider beta-glucan.
Can you just take it from the spoon?
You can take it from the spoon if you want. It doesn't taste bad. You can sprinkle it on any savory dish, on tomato sauce, or I put it in pizza sauce when we make pizza. And yes, you can make a very healthy pizza without the things that don't make it healthy.
So the heat wouldn't absorb it out or anything?
Can you speak a little louder?
So the heat of cooking this wouldn't?
It doesn't adversely affect it to a great degree. If you want to get the full impact, just take it as it is. My daughter-in-law makes a wonderful salad dressing using it. And so there are lots of things that you can do with nutritional yeast. It has a very pleasant flavor. Question in the back. It ramps up the immune system function without causing inflammation otherwise. It's a balanced stimulator of the immune system. All right, so those two things that you guess, question.
What's the name of that part?
Little lads.
Little lads, where do you get that?
Oh, well, Morning Glory has it. Hannaford? Hannaford has it now.
The one in Brunswick does.
Yeah. I know the lady that makes it, and she's really nice. How about that?
I have a daughter who's allergic to yeast.
Okay.
So is this bad?
This is not the same as yeast that's in bread, but it is a byproduct of brewing, and so she may or may not be allergic to this. She would have to test it. Question?
Can you take it every day, year round?
You may. You have my permission. Yeah.
Or how?
I think it probably would, especially if you're stressed. Or if you're stressing somebody else, give them some. I mean, you know. Question.
Cooked oatmeal and
You could put it in oatmeal, but I wouldn't like the taste of it. I'd say put your blueberries in the oatmeal and the raspberries and put this in something savory. Unless you like savory oatmeal. That's not my style. Okay, let's move on. The next thing is avoid excess sugar, and particularly no sugary foods between meals. Now you notice I made a division there. I said avoid excess sugar, and then I said no sugar between meals. Why is that? Sugar's not a poison, it's what your body runs on. It's fine to eat sugar, provided you have it with enough fiber that you don't absorb it rapidly and push your blood sugar up. That's the key. So what did your mother tell you when you were little? You can't have your dessert until you finished your meal. She didn't know maybe why she said that, other than she wanted you to have all those other good things. But the truth of the matter is, if you're not a diabetic and you have a small piece of a good dessert like this fruit salad, at the end of the meal, after you've had a lot of fiber, the fiber's in the stomach, then the sugary whatever, not too sugary, but a little sugar comes down there, you're not going to absorb that sugar rapidly and it's not going to harm you. But if you had that sugar between meals on an empty stomach, you're going to absorb it very rapidly and you're going to get a problem. Well, what kind of a problem? The original research was done by a gentleman by the name of Sanchez. I had the good fortune of meeting Dr. Sanchez a few years ago. He did his research in 1965, and what he did is he gave people the equivalent of a banana split's worth of sugar. And he found that that amount of sugar effectively paralyze the neutrophils from phagocytizing bacteria and viruses for about 5 to 6 hours. Well, neutrophils are the main foot soldiers of the immune system, and if they're paralyzed and you're exposed to an infection, you're going to get it. It's like saying, well, let's see, how can we invade this country? Well, we'll just give all the soldiers sleeping sickness during the attack, and then we can get in. And that's what sugar does to the immune system. Specifically, many of you have heard me talk about the effect of sugar on the red blood cells. Remember, if you are a diabetic, you go to the doctor and they measure what? Hemoglobin A1C, right? Well, what they're really measuring is what percentage of red blood cells have sugar attached to the hemoglobin in them. And if you're a poorly controlled diabetic, then you have a higher percentage of your red cells that have sugar attached to them. That sugar is attached irreversibly to the red cells. Red cells live for 3 months, and so we measure that, and then I can see the diabetic every 3 months. I could measure collagen, but collagen is long-term, so I could only see the diabetics every 2 or 3 years, and I'd go broke. So I use hemoglobin A1C. But white cells live for only 6 to 12 hours, the neutrophils, and then they're replenished. And so if you eat a big dose of sugar and you paralyze, you actually stiffen the membrane of the white cells. You may recall, if you stiffen the membrane of the red cell is about 8 microns in diameter. The capillaries through which it flows are about 3 to 4 microns in diameter, and so you impair circulation when you eat a lot of sugar or when you're a diabetic. And so you don't want to do that. You want to keep the number of red cells tagged with sugar really low. The same is true with white blood cells, only when you stiffen the membrane of white blood cells, they can't get out of the blood and into the tissue very well because they do something called diapedese. That means literally walk across. They have to walk across the membrane of the capillary to get out to where the infection is. And if the membrane is stiff, they can't squeeze through the cell-cell junction of the endothelial cells and get out to where the infection is. And even if they do get there, because the membrane's stiff, they can't eat the bacteria because white cells don't have a mouth. They have to flow around, their membrane has to flow around the bacteria and the viruses and pull it in, and then they can phagocytize or eat it up. So, you go to a party and you have a big, whatever, dessert, and it's just a party, so you don't have a big meal, and so that sugar hits the system, bang, and your blood sugar goes up, and your white cells are paralyzed for the next 6 to 8 hours, and while you're at the party, there's someone who shouldn't have come, and you know that because they've got tissues in their pocket, and they're doing this and that and shaking hands. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to come down with that infection. That's why I know I'll always be busy after Halloween, after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, and after Easter. We just have to accommodate that because people go to parties and eat too much sugar, paralyze their immune system, and share germs. So if you don't want to do that, don't do that. Yeah, okay. So that's sugar. All right. Minimize excess calories and food that cause unnecessary inflammation. Question? Yeah.
When you say sugary snacks, do you mean natural sugar or?
I mean sugar, period. I don't care if it's natural or unnatural. If you take juice and drink it, it'll push your sugar up. If you eat the fruit, it won't. That's why I said I'd like to have some more berries in this stuff than we did. Because berries, remember, I said they knock the blood sugar down. There are enough fiber and pectin in the berries. Pectin is really good at slowing sugar absorption. So there's enough in that you wouldn't have all been on a sugar high. and you're not on much because there's a lot of fiber in the mangoes and the other stuff, but it does push your sugar up a little. So, but juice or soda or maple syrup or honey, all of those will push your sugar up. And I'm not saying never use them, I'm saying use them with high fiber foods, because fiber is what slows sugar absorption. And you can make, my wife and I trialed this a few years ago, I don't know where she went, but hiding? No. We can make ice cream that's high fiber and tastes sweet. Yeah, and so you can do it, right? Remember when we tried that? We used avocado as a base for the ice cream. You think ice cream out of avocado? You should taste it. So you can do it and have something taste really sweet and still not push your sugar up. Yeah, all right. So any other questions, or shall I move on? Okay, we'll move on. So minimize excess calories in food that cause unnecessary inflammation. Well, what causes unnecessary inflammation? Foods without fiber. And what are those? Meat, milk, eggs, cheese, fish, chicken, and turkey have no fiber. And so they cause more inflammation. How do they do that? They don't feed the microbiome in your gut that produces butyrate. Butyrate is produced by bacteria that eat fiber. So the more fiber you eat, the more bacteria move into your gut that produce butyrate, which downregulates the immune system, just like the military police keep the armed forces in control. They don't keep them from fighting battles, but they keep them from getting out of control. Right? If you have a whole bunch of, young 20, 30-year-old men with lots of testosterone and lots of guns running around, you better have a military police to keep them in control. And butyrate works like that and just says, I want you to be, you're on alert, but you got to be cool, and the enemy hasn't come yet. And that's from foods that are high in fiber. It feeds those bacteria in your gut. So anytime you want to down-regulate inflammation in your system, you're going to go toward a plant-based diet and avoid the excess calories. Yes, question?
How about something like kefir?
Great question. How about kefir? Kefir is a probiotic. It has lactobacillus in it. And probiotics are important. And yogurt, for instance, has been shown to decrease your risk of getting a cold. Why? Because if you fill your mouth with probiotics, that is lactobacillus, you don't leave enough room or as much room for the virus and whatnot to take up residence. But what we know is it's more important for you to get adequate prebiotics than to just take probiotics every day. Well, what are prebiotics? Prebiotics are fiber and food substances that the bacteria eat. We're all into probiotics these days. Well, how come our grandfather and grandmother weren't? Well, two reasons. One, if you go to the grocery stores around here, most of the food has been irradiated to lengthen its shelf life. That is, they kill the bacteria. Has anyone made sauerkraut? Okay, you made sauerkraut. You took cabbage and you shredded it, and then what did you do?
Salt and water.
Salt and water. Did you put probiotics in it? Why not?
Because it makes its own.
It makes its own? No, it doesn't make its own. Lactobacillus normally grows on brassicas. It'll grow on beets. You can do the same with beets and make a lovely sauerkraut out of beets. You can do it with cabbage, you can do it with kale, you can do it because those bacteria love to live on those plants. And so you don't have to add them. They're already there. And if we ate closer to our gardens, we'd have all kinds of probiotics, and we'd have the prebiotics as well, because prebiotics are the plants. And we're just throwing pills down, probiotics, day after day after day, because we're not eating enough prebiotics. And if you skip the probiotics and just eat what the bacteria want to eat, you'll change the whole gut flora within 2 weeks. But you can't make money selling fiber, so we sell probiotics instead, and then we make money. Follow the money. All right, so that's minimizing unnecessary inflammation. Avoid and minimize alcohol. Why? Well, every single white blood cells have neurochemical receptors on them. Each one has neurochemical receptors. Every white blood cell is under the direct control of the mind. The unconscious mind, yes, but the mind. And what does alcohol do to the mind? Numbs it. And interestingly, if you look at white blood cells under the influence of alcohol, they don't function intelligently. Just like some people you've met under the influence. So if you're going to use alcohol, you notice I said avoid/minimize. The other reason to do that is alcohol is a sugar. I mean, it functions as a sugar in the body. It's an alcohol, not a sugar, but it functions like a sugar. And it does the same thing to the immune system that sugar does. But it also confuses the immune system, and so you don't get the same function. So if you're going to use alcohol, a small amount at the end of the meal, just like sugar. If you're going to have a sweet something, a small amount, really enjoy it at the end of the meal when you have lots of fiber and you slow the absorption. Don't go out and have a candy bar mid-afternoon, and don't go out and have a drink without something in your stomach. I mean, these are old habits that people have done for years that are common sense people, and they shouldn't be neglected. You should just understand them, and if at all possible, skip the alcohol entirely. But if you're going to have it, have your meal first, and then a small after-dinner drink. Question in the back.
And another reason to avoid it because it's going to kill the good bacteria in your gut.
Yeah, the alcohol does do that to some extent, although it is metabolized before it gets to the colon. So unless you drink excessively, it won't get to the colon to do that. But it also causes esophageal cancer. Lancet published an article in December last year, November or December, and their conclusion was the amount of alcohol that one should drink for health is 0. That was Lancet. That's the top medical journal, I think, in the world. There it is. So do what you want, but don't drink it and think you're doing yourself good. Will you reduce your risk of heart attack? Yes, slightly, and increase your risk of cancer. Who wants to do that? Not me. I'd rather die of a heart attack than cancer, personally, but I'd rather skip both.
Dr. Howe, how about that so many people believe that red wine?
Red wine, I like the way you say that. Red wine is much better than white wine because of the resveratrol in it. You can get the same benefit from grape juice without the alcohol, and there's more resveratrol in peanuts than in grapes, so whatever you want to do. But you don't need the alcohol to get the benefit of red wine. Okay. It sounds good. I'm from the South originally, so I'm just, So, all right. So exercise and rest. There's an interesting study, let's see if I have it here. Yeah. Where they looked at communities and the risk of hospitalization from influenza. And they found in communities, the lower the activity level, the higher the risk of hospitalization for influenza. Exercise actually stimulates the immune system up to a point. If you run a marathon, you're going to depress it. But if you exercise vigorously for an hour a day, you're going to stimulate the immune system, and you'll be much less likely to get a cold or an influenza. One of the reasons for that is when you exercise in the winter, what happens to your nose? It runs. Yeah, you've all lived in Maine through the winter. You know, it runs. Is that good or bad? It's good because you clear stuff out. In fact, as we'll see below, one of the best things you can do if you come down with an infection, as soon as possible, get outside and do a little exercise and get things running, because you want to clear that out to prevent sinus infections and etc. But exercise is very good, not excessive. I don't want you to go out and run ultra marathons to prevent infection, but I would want you to go out and exercise at least a half an hour a day or an hour. That's really good for your immune system. My wife and I were walking this morning at 5:30, something like that, and I thought, I'm glad I'm doing this so I can tell the people tonight. Yeah. So,
I have a question.
question.
7 days a week?
Yeah?
You said balanced.
Okay, so balance. All right, and so I'll tell you this. You do not have to exercise every day of the week. You only have to exercise the days you plan to eat. All right, so, gotcha. Rest. Don't skip rest to exercise. Okay? Why? If you sleep less than 7 hours a night, you will increase your risk for developing a cold by 3-fold. Now, how do we know this? Because they got these people together and they said, listen, we'll pay you $800 if you will allow us to squeeze a dropper full of cold viruses up your nose. And then they took them and divided them according to how many hours they were sleeping. And they found this. If you sleep less than hours, you're 7 hours a night, your risk of getting a cold goes up 3-fold compared to those that get 8 to 10. More than 10 causes problems too, but 8's about right, 7 to 8. But if it's less than 7, your risk goes up 3-fold. If it's less than 6, it goes up 4-fold. And if it's less than 5, it's about 4.5 times. So get your sleep. Get your sleep. That's really important. I know when I'm going to come down with a cold, it's when I've been on call and up all night. Then I know I'm at real risk. So then I have to eat my beta-glucan or my yeast, right? Yeah.
Broken up sleep, or does it have to be straight?
It doesn't have to be straight, although straight's ideal. I can tell you that the common thing for us as we age is to have broken sleep. That's not new, but even if you nap during the day and get a little sleep, you want greater than 7 hours total. Although everyone dreams of having uninterrupted sleep, those that do sleep studies know that that's pretty rare to have 7 hours where you don't even roll over. You usually have to check the plumbing if you're over 65 at least once a night to make sure it's not leaking and you're not leaking. But nonetheless, exercise and rest, finding the balance there. Attitude and immune function. Interesting study from, let's see, Department of Psychology, Carnegie Mellon University. What they did is they took people and assessed their attitudes, and they divided them into 2 groups, those with a positive attitude and those that were more like me by nature. Lynn's the positive one in our family. That's why I married her, so I'd get more positive. So I wouldn't get colds. I mean, you know, you got to do things scientifically. And what they found is that a positive attitude is one of the best ways to avoid infection. Now, Why is that? One of my favorite studies, and some of you have heard me quote this before, was published actually about 20 years ago in the Journal of Advancement in Medicine. They took a group of people and they said, we want you to think back to a time in your life when you felt really trapped and hurt and violated, and we want you to relive, don't do that, okay, don't do that, but we want you to relive that experience for 5 minutes. And they measured their salivary IgA before, and then after that 5 minutes of reliving that negative experience, they measured it every 15 minutes until it returned to baseline. And what they found was, in those people that relived that negative experience, really got into it for 5 minutes, their salivary IgA levels fell by 70% within 10 minutes of that time and didn't return to baseline for 5 hours. So don't go there. They took the same people and they said, now, and you can do this now, they said, now we want you to think back to a time in your life when it was really nice and you felt loved and accepted, and it was just, you know, beautiful sunsets or sunrises, and, you know, you can all go there. You don't even have to listen to the rest of what I have to say if you go there. And they had them do that for 5 minutes, and they found that their salivary IgA levels went up by 80%, and it took about 5 hours to go back down to baseline. So all you have to do is think of something really nice about every 5 hours and you're golden, right? Attitude is something you choose because you choose your thoughts. Sometimes you don't think you do. Things come through your head and you think, oh, well, that thought came from me, instead of realizing it might have been someone that walked by the door and triggered something you had remembered from long ago, and even if it did, you can choose not to think about that, right? So you are responsible for your attitude. Like it or not, you choose your attitude. I will grant you that sometimes it's harder to choose a happy attitude than others, but every time, whether it's easy or hard, you're healthier to choose the positive attitude. Critically important. Choose your attitude, and when everybody's dropping about with flus and all that, just smile and, you know, be cool, and your immune system will pick up immediately. All right, don't forget hygiene, hand washing. You know what I do is I have these hand cleansers in my office, and after I've been with patients that are sneezing and blowing and spraying and everything, I wash my hands with that, and then I take my hand and I do this. I squirt some on, I just go right across my mouth and nose like that, because that's where those bugs get in, right? Just like that. And that's helpful. Washing, soap and water works as good as anything, though. I mean, you don't have to have fancy hand cleaners, just soap and water. Wash your face, wash your hands, wear a mask. If you're not sick, wear a mask, because then if you're with people that are sick, I mean, if you're in a flu situation, that's fine. Should you avoid all infections? Well, an infection now and then isn't all bad, because it does allow your body to make those antibodies. You remember historically when the white people came to this country, what happened to the Indians when they were exposed to flu? Died. My grandfather was in Alaska in 1918 when the flu epidemic went through. He was one of the guys that took serum out to the villages and then took a census afterwards. And whole villages were completely wiped out. Why? They hadn't had exposure to influenza. And vaccinating the whole country is great with influenza vaccine. I don't recommend it. Why? Because if you get an influenza vaccine every year from when you're little till when you're old and then miss it 1 year, or we miss the vaccine and don't get it right, you're going to have a worse case. So I recommend everyone get a flu shot when you're over 65, particularly if you have a chronic disease. Those of you who are going to do all of these things and are younger than 65 and not a healthcare worker and not working with kids and can isolate yourself if you get the flu, you don't have to take the immunization. Be strong, keep yourself up, and you'll form antibodies. And then if we miss it 1 year, you won't die from the flu because you've never been exposed to it, like the poor Indians and Eskimos. So there's real benefits to the immunizations. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but think about these things as well. Be real and know the science. All right, now natural remedies for when your best wasn't enough. Adequate hydration. Drink, drink, drink water, unless you have congestive heart failure or hyponatremia or something else. But if you're normal, drink water. Keep your mucous membranes moist. Why? If your mucus is thick and dry because you're not drinking enough, the virus hits there, you can't move it on, it's going in. You got that, you know your nose makes 2 quarts of liquid a day, normally. But if you're dehydrated, you don't. The stuff gets thick and then you're at risk. So drink water. 8 glasses is plenty for most of us unless you're exercising. 6 for people 70 and older unless they're exercising, because you don't concentrate your urine quite as well. But stay well hydrated. Proper clothing. What do I mean? Cover your extremities as heavily as you do your chest. Why is that? Because if you get a cold and you don't want it to go into bronchitis or pneumonia or something like that, you don't want to get congestion of the blood around the respiratory organs. And I see people out all the time, particularly ladies. They got a great big heavy coat on and bare legs. Get a life. You know, if you want to show us your legs, do it in the summer, not in the winter. Get some long johns on there or a long wool skirt and something else, and cover your arms. You want to cover, and you know what? You don't need nearly as many layers if you layer the extremities with the same number of layers as your chest. Unless you're overheated, keep your extremities covered when you have a cold or flu or something like that. So proper clothing. You know, wear those fleece-lined jeans. Anybody seen those? They're wonderful. You don't fear the winter if you've got enough clothes on your legs and your arms. I can go out when it's 0 degrees and work out in the woods, no problem, as long as I have fleece-lined jeans and maybe a thin pair of long johns under that, undershirt, flannel shirt, and a wool shirt on top. Don't need a coat. Got to have a hat and gloves, of course, but you don't need all that bulky clothes if you layer properly, and you'll prevent yourself from getting pneumonias and chills and that sort of thing. So dress wisely and thoughtfully. Don't ignore your arms and legs, please. All right, here's another one. Don't blow your nose. What? Yes, don't blow your nose. All right, so we're going to do an experiment here. Everybody sniff really hard like this. Okay, what do you feel up in your sinuses when you do that? Up here. Now you don't feel pressure. If you want to feel pressure, blow your nose. What you feel is a drawing, because when you sniff really hard because of the Bernoulli principle, go back to physics, you pull that stuff down. We know, because they've done studies tagging the mucus, that if you blow really hard, you blow that, pardon, S-N-O-T, snot, up into your sinuses. But if you sniff, you pull it down. So what you find is if you get a cold and you never blow your nose, unless it's dripping, a little puff, I'll allow that, but none of this, okay, none of that. If you sniff instead, your cold will last a week instead of 2, because you're not reinfecting yourself around like that. And then you're not going to get a sinus infection, because you usually get a sinus infection because the infection's here and you blow it right up there. Do you know kids don't know how to blow their nose? How many of you ladies taught your children to do that? Shame on you. Let nature alone. Give them a Kleenex, they can wipe it. A little puff, yes, but don't just brr, and don't occlude one side, because then you are going to blow it up. Okay?
What about sinus rinses?
What's that?
Sinus rinse.
I don't go much for sinus rinses. If you want to do one thing, you can get some saltwater nose spray, squirt it up there, sniff, wash the stuff out and down and swallow it or spit. The nice thing is as soon as that stuff hits the stomach, it's inactivated. Yes?
If you do a sinus rinse, it's extremely important that you use sterile water or that you boil your own water. You do not want to use water from your tap for a nasal rinse.
That's for sure, unless you want to give, you can do it to your neighbor if you don't like them. But you don't want to introduce infection, okay? So if you drink enough water, you don't have to do that often, but if you want to use a nasal saline, you can buy some over the counter or you can make your own if you have sterile water. It's a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to a cup of water. That's normal saline, and that's a good rinse. My grandmother used to make it in a cup, and she didn't have a spray bottle. She just put her nostril down there and go up like that. It worked fine. She lived to a ripe old age. So don't blow your nose, snort instead. One last thing, hot and cold treatments. I could do a whole lecture. Yes, question?
What about steam?
Steam is great. We're coming to it right here. Hot and cold treatments. We could do a whole night on hydrotherapy. You know, before we had antibiotics, this was the only way to treat infection, by encouraging your own immune system to get ramped up to fight it. Anybody ever had a fever? Did anyone ever take something to knock the fever down? Shame on you. Why did I say that? Well, it's good for kids if you're afraid they're going to have a seizure, yes. But there was a study done some years ago now where they gave people, squirted influenza up their nose and then gave some ibuprofen and some acetaminophen and some aspirin and some nothing. And what they found is the people that took the anti-inflammatories felt a little better, and in order to feel a little better, their cold lasted, 5 days longer. You get a fever for a reason. That stimulates the immune system, it gets ramped up, and it draws the white blood cells there to fight the infection. So what you ought to do instead is give yourself a fever treatment, provided you don't get your temperature over 104, that's danger ground, or don't have a heart problem. But if you're generally healthy and you take a really hot bath up to here, that'll raise your temperature and you'll get well sooner. That's what my wife does. Whenever she feels like she's coming down with a cold, she gets in a hot bath and stays there till she's pink. And that will often stop it, because you're giving yourself a fever. You're stimulating that immune system. It works best if you end with a cold shower. And if you want to do it back and forth until you can't tell the difference between hot and cold, that works really well. A sauna works great. They've done studies on those as well. You want to heat it up nice and hot. We have a wood-fired sauna, and we get it up to about 200 degrees and then get in there and then go roll in the snow. Now that's exciting. Or if you really want a jolt, jump in the ocean after that in December. But don't do that if you have a heart problem.
How about Epsom salt bath?
Epsom salt bath. Epsom salt is a drying salt. It's great for infections in the hand or the leg, and it won't hurt otherwise either. It's the temperature that helps you the most, though. Question in the back. Infrared heat's good enough. I'm just cheap, and I've got wood that I can burn that, is trash wood from around, because we have trees around, and I didn't want to burn electricity when I could burn wood. So, but yeah, infrared's fine. So hot and cold works really well, but never cold without the hot first. Steam. Steam is all right. It'll thin the secretions, but it draws blood right there, and it'll often cause congestion. So if you use steam, end with cold compresses on your face to reduce the swelling, and it'll help reduce the congestion as well. All right, well, that's an awful lot in a short time. Any other questions? One in the back. I didn't catch it. Okay, shingle shots. Yeah, I think shingle shots can be very helpful. The one that was out 3 years ago was about 50 to 60% effective. The one that's out now is about 90+% effective. But there's a long waiting list. You usually can't get it. You can just dream about it. The younger generation that had the chickenpox vaccine don't need the shingle shot because you won't get shingles unless you had chickenpox first. So there's that. Question.
Rather than immunity, do you have some favorite cookbooks?
I'm going to hand the phone to my wife. My favorite cookbook is the one she hasn't published yet. Lynn, come up here and tell us your favorite cookbooks. You know, cookbooks are interesting. It depends on what you're wanting to do. We teach vegan cookery that's for treatment of illness or prevention of illness. But you know, a lot of people eat pretty moderate diet and live to old age, and they don't want to be as extreme as we are. Although you won't feel bad on what we eat. And if you have diabetes, it'll get better. And if you have coronary disease, it'll get better. And if you have high blood pressure, it'll get better. And if you're at risk for cancer, your risk will go down. But we're using food as medicine to prevent illness. With that caveat,
So we eat whole food, plant-based diet, nothing refined. There are two authors, Esselstyn and Ornish, who have published quite a bit and also have published cookbooks. Personally, also Dr. Greger, he has nutritionfacts.org, and he is an amazing resource. He has little YouTubes you can watch. He has cookbooks. He has How Not to Die. He's an excellent resource. I personally watch a lot of blogs, and I'm always watching for recipes. And sometimes you just have to take a recipe and actually do some changes, like Cheryl mentioned earlier. Like I really love pesto, and when we first tried to change our diet, I thought, oh, I'm going to really miss pesto, because I thought I had to have a half a cup of olive oil to make it. But now I've learned that I can make it just subbing in avocado. So once you learn to start subbing things in, you can actually utilize a lot of your favorite recipes.
you just have to learn to cook again.
I've been cooking since I was 18, so.
Yeah, so, I mean, when we've been vegetarians since we were married, and I've been vegetarian all my life, but we became vegan because I read some articles to my wife, and she started throwing things out before I was done reading the article. And then we went whole food plant-based with no oil and very little refined carbohydrate. And at first I thought we'd gone to Auschwitz. But then you learn to cook again, and our sons were away at college at the time, and when they came home after we had made this shift, they said, I don't know what you're doing with the cooking, but the food tastes better. And so, I don't want to live longer if it doesn't taste good, right? But you can learn to make it really good. Some cookbooks. Forks Over Knives, you probably have that one. It's a great one. But really what we're doing now is modifying recipes. So when Lynn prints her cookbook, that'll be the one I'll recommend. Yes, in the back. What's my recipe for pizza without cheese? We make, the key to pizza without cheese is the sauce. That's the key, because if you have a good enough tasting sauce, you don't need cheese. And often we don't put it on, but if we're going to put some on, we make a cashew-based cheese. Yeah. But you need to make good sauce. And what I do for sauce is we dry our own tomatoes. We dry Juliettes, and then I throw those in the blender and turn them into powder, and then I add Kalamata olives and garlic and red pepper, not the hot red peppers, but the good red peppers that we grow in our garden and that are dried, and a little bit of water and garlic. Garlic's key, but you know, there's garlic and garlic. We grow our own garlic too, and it's real garlic. And we put that in, a few other seasonings, and you've got a sauce that is, you just can't get enough of. And you put that on a whole grain crust, and now you're starting to go places. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't feed all of you. Question.
So is there any way to do a diet like this for somebody who's allergic to all nuts?
Absolutely. There is. You use seeds instead, sunflower seeds in place of the nuts. That's doable. You have to get creative, but it is absolutely doable. And you can eat too many nuts. And so even those of us who are on a whole food plant-based diet, we need to be careful with nuts. Remember, nuts have 2,800 calories per pound. And if you're trying to lose weight, that's not the way to go. Interestingly, if you actually chew the nuts, you lose 1/3 of the calories. They go through into your colon and feed those bacteria, it's good, and it'll help with satiety, and you can lose weight. But if you grind them up into nut butter, that doesn't work. So if you're trying to lose weight, avoid the nut butters. But you can do things with seeds: flax seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds. You can make really nice things.
And natural nut, not what we buy in the little round blue can that's full of salt and oil.
Yeah, my wife and I use almost exclusively raw nuts for that reason. Question?
What about celery? I love it.
Celery?
Yeah, is that?
More the better. The nice thing about celery is it takes more energy to chew it than there is in it, so you're going to lose weight, and it's a wonderful seasoning. It's great stuff.